let's talk about courage. As of posting this, it's the week of Memorial Day. Of course, the primary form we think of for courage is, you know, battle, firefighters, that sort of thing. But there's, taking risks also involves courage. I've been reading Xenophon recently. I have not finished it, but in that he talks about courage a lot as well, and that who you want your men to have courage, but for them to have courage, their officer needs to have courage, and if their officers are to have courage, then the general needs to have courage. You need to have the people who are in a position of authority to have the qualities you want the men to have. In the Anabasis, it's where he returns from Persia with the other Greek mercenaries, and they have to travel all the way across Persia and now hostile territory after the death of Cyrus. And so they reorder, all their leaders are killed. They reorder the military so that they can survive. And then they go through all these troubles, and he tries to look out for people and eventually gets betrayed. But he still did those. Eventually betrayed was more like his soldiers keep going, oh, you're doing terrible things for us. And it's like, well, I was looking out for you. Not trying to harm you, but trying to make sure you survived and made it home. The fact that you can make these complaints against me means I have done my job. But in that, there's stuff on morale, but there's also courage, right? You have to have the courage to take the risks. And that's true not just in battle, but in life in general, right? You have to have the courage to make the first approach. You have to have the courage to start the thing, to start a business, ask for a raise. Even that can be courageous. If you don't have the courage to do that, you'll wind up languishing, falling behind where you could be, right? You have to have the courage to leave one job for another, or to start something new, or to change direction in life, to take certain risks. And some of them aren't courage in the same sense as it is, charging into enemy fire, right? Or jumping on the grenade, right? It's not the same type of courage, but it is still under something we would call courage. And you need it throughout life, right? You need to have the courage to try something different, even. And again, that's not, you're not going to be lauded because you changed your diet to better food, but you have to have the courage to change your life, even going against your own instincts, where you might want to maintain what you have been doing in the past, right? You need, if you're going to be a leader, whether you're a manager in corporate, or you're going to have employees, or in politics, or anywhere, you need to have courage, right? You can't always fall back to doing what's safe and known, because sometimes that causes more problems down the line. And that's not to say that there aren't risks with most things that would require some courage to do. There's a British sitcom called Yes Minister, where Sir Humphrey, a lifetime civil servant, will tell the minister, Jim Hacker, that his decision is courageous, because that will mean it will lose you votes, because it is not the easy solution. It is not the tried solution. It's the new thing. In corporate, you'll sometimes hear, nobody ever got in trouble for buying from IBM. And kind of like, yeah, that's the safe decision, but you can't always do with a safe decision. Sometimes you have to take that risk of, I'm going to make this decision and maybe I get fired. I'm going to go ask for that raise, and maybe I don't get it, right? And maybe then I know, okay, I didn't get it. I'm not fired immediately, but I know I'm on the chopping block, so it's time to find another job. Or even if you're not on the chopping block, it may just be time to, okay, I need to leave this comfortable situation and find something else. Avoid, taking on massive amounts of debt, because that debt is a risk. In most cases, there are useful times to take on debt, and there's a lot of bad types of debt out there. I'm not really sure there's really a good form of debt. Some forms are certainly more useful than others. Like a house mortgage is one of the more useful forms of debt, because you may not have huge sums of money to buy a house. And of course, there's a whole other background set of information. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other circumstances that tie into that. But, so there's some forms that are more useful, but then there's stuff like credit card debt where it's generally not. If you're in the situation where you have to do that to put food on the table, that's one thing. But for most people, that's not the case. The most common form in the US is going to be student loans. And for a lot of people, that's not a useful form of debt. Depending on what field you're going into, what sort of money you can make afterwards, it can be. But for a lot of people, as far as I can tell, it is not a useful form of debt. The return on whatever education you got from it is not so great as to help you pay it off in a reasonable amount of time. And so, best to avoid those. Like, I don't think it's very courageous to take on student loans in any circumstance, right? I wouldn't call that courageous, but it might be courageous to go out and start a business and to put your livelihood on the line to try to make that work. Because most businesses will fail within the first, I think, 5 years. They'll just fail for a whole variety of circumstances, a lot of which you don't have control over, right? If you start a restaurant and all of a sudden the economy tanks and nobody's eating out anymore, well, that's kind of outside of your control. But you can't do anything about it either, right? Whereas, if you start a restaurant and the economy's booming and everybody makes money, well, maybe it fails because of other decisions you've made. But either way, it's still a form of courage to take that risk. Again, though, it's not the same as running into a burning building, jumping on a grenade, charging into an enemy building. I mean, it's not the same, but it is still within the same family of things. Most of us, at least as of posting this, will likely have to have some amount of courage in a job, right? Changing a job, changing a direction, changing a life direction, leaving situations where you don't know what's going to happen, right? Moving to a new city, those sorts of things, right? Smaller types of courage, but still courage, right? Still courage nonetheless. And you need to have courage to do those things. Most people are ruled by fear. They are enslaved by fear. There is no other way around it. Most stuff in life is ruled by fear. Fear of risks, weather, car accidents, planes, travel accidents, those sorts of things. There's lots of fear. Most people are ruled by it. You can see that in a lot of political things. If you look at it and go, okay, who in this scenario is being ruled by fear? So you need to have courage. You don't want to be ruled by fear. If you don't have courage, you will be ruled by fear. And that's no way to live. Right? And there are some things you can do to make that easier. Right? I don't have to be afraid of losing my job if I don't have huge amounts of debt and I have a nice nest egg where, okay, I lose my job, I can find some type of work within the next 6 months. Maybe it's not what I was doing before, but I'm going to land on my feet. If you have that mentality, which you have to earn, right? You have to earn by going into situations you aren't familiar with and making them work. Maybe they don't work perfectly, but they work, right? Perfect is the enemy of good, and good enough is often all you need. So have the courage to take those risks. Have the courage to take risks. Don't take them blindly, but have the courage to take them. And that's all I have for you this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next week with another video.